And there it is. Hello.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the second season. It will be right, Megan, of the
Yeah. Our
Forgotten
premiere.
Composers
Yep. No
podcast.
countdown today because we have no shunting.
No
But
chanting, so no
King
countdown.
countdown.
He's
He's
gonna be
he's busy
available.
making
Yeah,
deadlines, but he'll be back.
yeah. He's on a secret mission, secret composition mission. So this will be the premiere of the second season in a way. And we have a guest today. We have Melanie
Yeah.
Aceto. And do you want to introduce yourself, Melanie?
I would. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me, Megan and Juan. I'm happy to be here. I'm Melanie
Yeah.
Aceto, and I'm located in Buffalo, New York. I'm a choreographer and dancer, and I currently teach at the University of Buffalo. I've been dancing kind of forever. I dance and perform in modern dance, and socially, I'm a salsa dancer but have been making work for 20 years or so. I make solo work and group work. I can talk more about that. And yeah, here to
Mhm.
share my work and some thoughts on composing with bodies. So
Mhm.
That's a great way to describe it. Composing with
Oh
body.
yeah.
I think I'm gonna steal that idea.
dig it.
I hope that you don't mind because I'm gonna use it. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
um
Yeah,
this
so is it I think one thing that's really different about dance compared to music, although I think music is kind of getting up there, is that there aren't a lot of people who both write and perform
Mm,
in music. I think there's getting to be a little bit more. In fact, like when I went to school, it was highly discouraged. I did both. It was like very, very much discouraged. Um, yeah, and so that's very different. I'm kind of wondering, is it like different writing a piece for yourself versus writing a piece for other people?
it is, and I think in dance it's going the other way. Like you often don't find a dancer who doesn't, or a choreographer who doesn't dance. Most
Uh-huh.
choreographers dance and like say still dance. They dance while they're
Mhm.
making for the duration of while they're making work. Only much later in life do they maybe stop dancing themselves and still continue to make
Mhm.
work. And they would do that because they would have dancers who have worked with them, so they are familiar with their vocabulary, and a well-established company can kind of get away with that. But so it's possible to make pieces without dancing, but it's more typical for the choreographer to move, even if you're not in your own work. So yeah, I mean, I in particular make work, even if I'm making it on the dancers, it's in my body at the beginning. I'll make the phrases on me. That's
Mhm.
not necessarily some choreographers task their dancers with generating material, which I do as well. But anyhow, just to say, I usually try things out on myself first before sharing it with the dancers. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, so I guess to say it's not much different making a solo on me than making for me to make a group piece because I put it on myself anyhow. Like the phrases,
Mhm.
the movement phrases that I generate myself. So I will learn that. It will quickly disappear out of my head and body. I will, I couldn't do the pieces we'll look at today. I, I nearly instantaneously don't have that in my body anymore, but I try it on. And
it's
then
very interesting that you mentioned phrasing because
mhm.
right out of the bat, like it seems like we share some common ground on vocabulary on how we think
Yeah.
about time, and I think that we can speak about that a bit onwards toward a bit
Mhm.
later towards the interview. But yeah, so people know what you're talking about. Do you want me to show a work of yours? So
Sure. Wanted to say too, Megan had asked me to describe my work, and maybe this is a good lead
Uh-huh.
in.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to say, of course, to talk about it, but I need to, find a way to do that. And on my website, I say that I'm interested in lush and comedic work. And I
mhm.
think 20 years later, that's still true. So I'm either interested in something, making something beautiful, or trying to make something beautiful, like lush, and yeah, just what the word lush means, or comedic. So I don't often start by trying to make something comedic, but sometimes I end up going that way, so I just go with it. But I'm not I'm not interested in narrative or sharing a message. It's more an exploration, more, I think, well, I was going to say along the lines of music, but I know the spectrum of.
I would think too that like narrative is more there is more direct and like precise, whereas I think trying to make something beautiful or comedic, I mean, both of those words are up for interpretation. Like, what is beauty? Like, what is comedy? And that can be really, I think, an interesting pursuit too.
Yes. So quite open. Like, I'm not after a certain thing, like a message or a certain narrative. Exactly, Megan. Like, just open.
Because a lot of your work that I think is beautiful, I don't think it's necessarily beautiful like in a very super obvious way, like what you would like one would think like immediately when they think of beauty. It kind of showcases maybe new things too.
Yeah, I'm usually going for beauty sometimes, or interested in what looks beautiful, but really just to me. So it might not be. Yeah. So yeah, you've definitely got it. So maybe we show Cloud first. Do you want to show Cloud?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go with that one. This piece is from 2012. Cloud sound. So let's go.
And I think it's an 11-minute piece, so I don't know if we want to, skip ahead as we watch, but
is there a particular part you recommend us showing?
No.
It begins like this. Show the beginning. Do you think of your pieces as having sections, different sections? Yes. So this first section, how long would you say it lasts? Because it's kind of like the pacing. It's kind of like slow at the beginning and then it fastens up, right?
Yeah, the opening is quite long. This my pieces definitely have sections because I can always end up putting them on note cards, and then sometimes I move them around. This you can fast forward a bit because we get everyone on stage a little bit, and then we get them out from under there. Yeah, I guess go back a little bit. So
Like here.
yeah, go back just a titch, because just to show like the section is with all this stuff, and
Like
then
here you will say, or even more.
no, right here is good.
Right. Okay.
Just to say, like, it starts with that opening rumbling section of the billowy material, and then in order to do anything more, I kind of have to get some of that plastic off stage. So we got some of it off, and now they're under it, and so that this is like the underneath section, and there's this whole section where they're in the bubble, and then of course they can't stay there for forever. So then I have to kind of get them out.
But it's like, at least to me, it's like an organism waking up in a sense, in many ways.
Yeah,
being
and what
active towards the end. The pacing is very important for this piece. I think it's central to for the aesthetic. Not I don't like the word beauty. You were talking earlier about beauty, but it's like the aesthetic of the piece itself. The piece on its own terms, let's say.
Yeah, and what happens, especially, I wanted to show this because the material determines like the sections really, because once you're in something, you've got to get out of it. You know, if you're wrapped in plastic, you have to get out of it. So just
I
skip
like
ahead
that.
just slowly to show the, she eventually just a little bit. She, okay, here. So this is, she ends up walking off and dragging the material off of them to get them out. So we we called this like the bridal section where
What are
she,
you referring to as material? The dancing material or the tarp?
Or the
yeah, typically I say movement material, but in this
Movement
instant
material. Okay,
I'm talking about the plastic.
determine the section. So the materials determine the form of the piece.
The,
You
yep, the plastic, the, and then, you know, the other pieces, the newspaper or the paper bags, the materials, I should say, that I'm using determine um, how one thing, really the structure, which is why I wanted to point these out, because yeah, they really dictate an order of events that I don't have that limitation or frankly that structure um, determined for me when I don't use props or things. So in some ways it's kind of nice because it tells me what to do next. So then she enters and we call this is like the wedding dress section. So having to introduce now more plastic because I've kind of cleared it. So how
and
do you,
would
yeah.
you say, how do you think about this? Do you think of the totality of it first and kind of like write it through, or do you go along like improvising from section or to section, material through material? Because we have this thing in music, in composing music, that is called through compose, for example, where we go, we write, let's say classically a motif or something like that, a melody,
Mhm.
and we take that and we follow along with it from section to section until we end, or we can view it like from afar, have a blueprint of it, and then compose it out like we already have the totality of it in our heads. So I don't know, if I'm guessing that you can do both in your field, but I'm interested in how you do it.
Yeah, thanks for that. So with materials, when I'm using objects and things, it's it's the other way that you mentioned that I'm exploring with the
Mhm.
things and seeing what my options are. I'm kind of like finding, you know, maybe the instrumentation and the themes and motifs and then seeing how they fit together. So we just generate a lot of movement material. And we made sections for this piece, Cloud in particular. We made the bubble section, the rumbling section, the wedding section. We made all these sections, and I actually had more sections. And once we got it on stage, we took them out. It was just too long. So no, I generate the material. I generate the movement material with the objects, and then I piece it together in a sensical way, or you know, craft the piece
Mhm.
based on the sections, the options that I have. So it's not through composed. It's I don't have a motif that I'm carrying through. I have a giant brainstorm of movement material, and I then, which I like, and then I craft it. It's almost like like arranging, you know, maybe like furniture or fruit or
Stitching
something like
together stuff. It seems to me like you're stitching together different parts of a piece. And Megan used to describe, at least you described to me how you work your pieces somehow similar, don't you?
a lot of times I do. Um, yeah,
Very
no,
interesting.
it depends on the piece. Sometimes my pieces are processed, but yeah, a lot of times I do.
Yeah, I guess it's more like cooking. Like I see what I'm making the ingredients and I see what ingredients I have and then I choose we always have more material than we use. Like we it's sad because you're like, "Oh, I really love this thing that we made, but it actually doesn't fit in this piece." Meaning like it's not part of that piece, it's something else. So yeah, I would say yeah, every object prop piece that I've made that way.
I think that it's also noteworthy that the sound itself is produced by the movement, by the dancers here, which is
Mhm.
not always the case, right? Sometimes you have to use music, pre-recorded music, conventional music, and stuff
Mhm.
like that. I think that that's why Megan and I told you that we were attracted to this
Mhm.
particular piece. This could easily pass as a contemporary music composition in a way.
Well,
I
and a
Is
lot of
that
times, what I know, like a
what I was
conventional, like a lot of conventional like ballets, that they like teach dancers to not make noise on stage. And now, like you're giving dancers, oh, make noise on stage, like um,
that's
yeah.
oh now
Go ahead.
that's also why I wanted to show this piece or a piece early on because I wanted to make the distinction that this is not ballet. This is dance.
no.
This is contemporary dance. What you're doing, right? Some people
Uh,
might get it confused. Might don't. Do you get that or no?
no, not
No,
so
not
much. I
not
mean,
so much. Okay.
yeah, because I mean, the ballet companies do such a broad range of work these days. I mean, they might have the soft ballet slippers on, but they're doing many companies are doing, contemporary ballet, but probably not dancing with plastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I think
Probably.
no, they could. Um, yeah, the sound, I was really fortunate. I didn't anticipate that, and the sound, the ambient sound, the soundtrack that I had coming in came in way at the end of the process. It's chimes, bells, wind, just ambient sounds.
And there are long sounds. I noticed, right? Like almost drones.
Drones, yep. And I found it was nice. It's all I needed.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is
definitely.
the beginning of the piece? Is that just the sound of the tarp?
Yep.
Wow, because I remember, because I saw this piece live
Oh,
when it went, and and I remember like the beginning, because this you could hear the sound before the curtains opened, and it was like a
That would
deafening
be the
sound. You were
end.
just kind of like, what is
Bravo.
that? Um, um,
yeah, that was a
yeah.
really satisfying piece to make. I actually can't believe we generated. We have just limited time working within the confines of the University of Buffalo and their production season. And yeah, we generated a ton of stuff we had. So those are 9x12 drop cloths, like that you'd use for painting. And
Mhm.
we had singles, and then I taped together with packing tape 4, and then we had 8, a one that was 8 9x11s, and then I think we had one that was 12. What I forget, the one that covered the whole stage. I think was
Mhm.
like 12 of those taped together. So it was a lot of labor in managing all that plastic, and then we had to store the
Mhm.
plastic. It was a lot of stuff. I don't know what I would do if I was on the road with that piece, but
Does the plastic change as it moves? Like the
it does. It becomes, it's funny too. I was using, I got it at Lowe's and was using one brand, and then the brand itself changed. It was the same brand, but when I opened it up, it was more opaque, less clear. I don't know. And I was like, oh no, because yeah, just to say that over time, it becomes less see-through. So, and it
Mhm.
also starts to get kind of gross, like sweaty gross. So you have to keep changing it. But yeah, the material or the manufacturer changed as well. So it changed a bit, but from the original. But yeah, so we had to keep rotating in new
Yeah.
plastic.
Because I remember like striking is that it just like when you hear the sound of the tarp, and it's a loud sound, and then when the stage opens, you initially don't see you just see the tarp. You don't see any of the dancers moving it. And then, you kind of see one going through, but then when you start to see more dancers, you see them like silhouettes. And they're not like fully,
Visible.
seen. They're not like fully humanized, they're like just like these traces of human. And then even when like you start to remove the tarp, then it's like all the dancers are basically like on like fours, like they're, which is kind of seems like a primal position, because it's like, that's how a toddler would be, or an animal would be on like fours. So it's still like, it's like they're slowly becoming kind of more human throughout the piece.
Yeah, that too was a piece where I generated the movement outside of the plastic, and then they went under, and they had to figure out. I was not under the plastic for most of that piece, and they were the ones underneath figuring out how to navigate and breathe and all that. And even in the studio, it was hard sometimes because they couldn't hear me, because when they moved, it was so loud. It was shockingly loud under the plastic. So they would have to stop moving to get to hear what I was saying. Yeah, so they figured out how to function under there. Yeah, it was a fun piece, and that's an example of a piece where it's not narrative, but I'm telling you, once the thing is, dances with humans, so people always see narrative unless you're completely masked in some way or covered in costume.
I think people do that with music too, though. I mean, I know with my music, I write it also very with a non-narrative, but I think I also do have a lot of movement and images a lot of times in my music. But I get a lot of people, especially people not familiar with contemporary music, that are adding narratives to
as humans, that's how we
offend me,
kind of
but
make sense of things, pretty much since. Well, yeah. Now that I'm back to teaching, like since the beginning of humanity, of recorded history, pretty much, it's like through storytelling. It's like how what was considered truth at the beginning of history, even proto history before that, was storytelling. No, then came philosophy and all of this stuff. But yeah, it's like we make, even now where we live in such a technocratic age, sociological age, scientifically driven, etc., etc. Like the human makes sense of the world through stories that we tell ourselves. And yeah, it's something that, even though I can see as an artist and we can relate, that pretty much for me the process is the piece. What I see in your piece is like what you mentioned, the materials, the physical materials determine the sections, but how about the choreographic material? Does it determine the structure? Would you say that?
It does, especially the plastic, because you just get in it and are trying to figure out ways. To me, that's the real fun of choreographing. Like, I enjoy putting together the structure of the whole piece, but I enjoy exploring the possibilities within something like the plastic. I mean, I like to improvise just with my own body in the studio, but having that plastic. So yeah, just to get together, or to, I got together with the dancers, but just to go in the studio with the physical materials and see what's possible is really a lot of fun. So it did determine,
I think that
yeah, could
yeah,
you spin in it without getting, could we not trip? How could we not trip? How could we not slip on it? How could we not get so caught up in it that we couldn't get out of it? Yeah, so it
I
does
think it's funny
determine.
that you compare it to cooking, because cooking is pretty much a process-based thing that you do. Like without a process, it's like uh, the end material is just part of it, but without a process, it's like all of the work that goes into it is like sometimes it can take one turn or another turn, right? It's like not linear. Is what I want to say in many ways. I think that yeah, you kind of describe your work for other artists in a pretty satisfactory way. I don't want to say satisfactory. That sounds,
Yeah.
uh,
An
but
experience.
kind of like in a very melanistic way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you talked about aesthetics, right? What would you say in general about your aesthetics? Like we saw this piece and how you think about materials and process and stuff like that, but we also have other pieces that are very different in tone and in process and in what it tries to achieve or tries to portray, right? um, so do you have a general aesthetic?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, but I think I'm not sure if this is exactly an answer, but what I find is that I lead with curiosity. Like I'm genuinely curious in what I can do with the plastic. I'm curious about what I can do with my voice as a non-vocalist who has a cold right now, but for vent, or curious about the plastic bag. So that leads my aesthetic, but then right, what material do I choose at the end of the day? Yeah, I don't even know how to talk about that, but I I can say that I lead with curiosity, and that takes me down a road.
It's fine. I
I
don't
think
think
that comes
about it
across
as
in your
that
pieces
much
for
as
sure.
sorry.
Well, and
What will
also
you say?
I think that comes across like this curiosity comes across in your pieces for sure, and even across different pieces like Cloud, and then like Lunch is like a completely different vibe, but you still kind of have that curiosity. Yeah, and you also like it's like because we've collaborated and worked together, and like that you improvisation is also seems to be a big part of your practice as both a dancer and a teacher. Um, so does that how does that play into like you as a choreographer, your experience improvising?
Yeah, I can't imagine making work without improvising. Yeah, we have to show liaison. Shoot. Please send that over. That was made in the same way. The piece I made in collaboration with Megan, she had this amazing idea to connect a dancer via fishing line to a piano.
It's
And
challenging logistically,
but
we
that's a
made it
perfect,
happen.
yeah, perfect example of like nothing existed. So the only way we could find stuff is by being curious and improvising. There we go. And
And enlisting
generating.
a lot of help too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we just
Oh
had
yeah.
a combined, does that look good? Or what about this? What about
Oh
that? Yeah,
yeah.
we like this. We like
Well, I
that.
remember like you were talking about the plastic. I remember spending a lot of time figuring out like how do you get like tangled, but not so tangled that you're like actually stuck, but like actually it looked like it's like wrapping you around, and how to get untangled.
Yeah, because once this is another piece, once you're in something, you got to get out of it. It's like the
Uh-huh.
road to nowhere. I
Well,
also,
I didn't like. I think I didn't even. Yeah, I think we at first when we just were moving it, we didn't even think about like interacting. I think you started improvising and interacting with the fishing line as another. And we're like, oh, that becomes a whole new thing.
yeah. And I'm realizing all my beginnings are super extended and long. I take a while to establish
Do you
what's
think so? I
Well,
will say that I was
oh, I don't
watching
know.
Lunch, and Lunch isn't that. It kind of like, okay, it begins slow, like for 1 minute, but then it picks up and kind of like moves along pretty fast. I think I would say.
I mean, I think
Also,
when you
front
have the
page
big
too.
material, you kind of give the audience some time to sit with just the physical object on the stage, and then kind of so they're not just like curious about the object and then missing like all the movement and dance. They're as much because the movement and dance is slower for them to kind of grasp.
and the difference between liaison and cloud that I'm saying are similar in their staying with one idea, and lunch the music was driving it. So I have to go.
Mhm.
So when I don't have composed music, I stay with an idea a while.
Oh, yeah.
For better or for
So for
worse.
lunch, did you have the music first or after the dance?
No, I had the bags, just an idea to do bags, and then found
I could
sound.
notice that you can divide your work into two big categories. The ones that you have the music pre-recorded in a way and kind of more conventional music, and the one where the music is generated, which will be closer to contemporary classical music the way Megan and I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. Um,
Yeah.
and this would be
Oh,
an
yeah.
example
Sure.
of that. Like, and it goes and develops like into faster and more violent movements after, right? Like here, for example.
Well, yeah, and then she starts to rap and interact with the strings more too.
But then you're not playing the piano. Then you begin playing the piano again.
And I think you rap after this. Oh my god.
I really like this because I really like that relationship between the mechanical and the human.
Mm-hmm.
The violence that it is intrinsic between
Well,
that dialogue.
I remember when I first thought of the idea, it was thought of so, we had met. David Felder had like give me your contact and was like, you know what, you should meet this professor of dance, Melanie Aceto. Like whether you just like have conversation about art or maybe she coaches a piece or maybe you do something. I think that there's some overlap aesthetically, and like you ended up like we were throwing out ideas and you ended up doing a lot of improvisation in that first meeting, and I was like very captivated by all your improvisation. And then you had mentioned how you wanted to play the piano, and so I left and be like, oh yeah, I'd like to have her play the piano, but I don't want to teach her to play the piano because what she's already doing is so beautiful and captivating, and that seems like a more interesting route. So it was a very vague idea that eventually became a way for you to play the piano without actually playing the piano in a conventional way.
Yeah, I never thought that would be that way. And this is similar to cloud in that you have to there's an area, I'm going to use the word expertise, but there's a level of expertise that you have to get with the material. Like you had to
Mm-hmm.
move the plastic in a way such that, you can manage it. And this, you have to learn to like manage the strings in a way so that it works.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
This
remember
seems
you
very
got very good after a while with getting like untangled in improvisation.
this seems very physically demanding. It kind of like leads me
Mm-hmm.
to a question: how do you train? How do you practice, so to speak?
And I
Uh,
think actually, like, if you don't, I think she makes it look much easier and safe than it is because there's actually like resistance that she's physically feeling the entirety of the piece, even if her movement is like small. Um, it's nonstop kind of resistance.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, you were
This
going.
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to share that this piece was challenging because of balance. Like I wanted the pull, the lean to use the strings, but you can't completely um, give all your weight, or you would like I would fall over. So I remember balance being like really challenging with this because I am standing on my one leg, but you have to anyhow manage the amount of resistance to get the sensation of pull but not falling
Mm-hmm.
over. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this was a
So
little
how do you get? Because like a lot of like what you do seems beyond like you know, my daughter takes like ballet and jazz. I mean, it seems way beyond like what they kind of skills that they begin to teach there. Like, what other kinds of training you have to do?
For me, what makes me able to improvise with plastic and paper bags and fishing line and all that is actually ballet, but ballet and yoga. So that doesn't work for everybody, or not everybody's interested in doing that. But training and taking ballet class and yoga gives me the strength and the flexibility to do the things that I want to do in choreography. So, you know, again, people train in different ways, but that, strangely enough, training in ballet gives me the ability to like balance with holding like a fishing line.
I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do remember you saying, like, when we performed the piece, that you would always want to take a yoga class before working with us.
Yep. Yeah, you just need, they both give me stability and flexibility. So the balance of strength and flexibility. And balance, they both train you in balance. Which is good. Yeah. Yeah, you had to be really patient to watch this piece, huh? You have to just watch it. Not a lot is going on. So funny. I kind of like it.
Let's fast forward a bit towards the end.
Like this movement.
I like the violence in it, the intrinsic violence. It's violence of movement, violence in the sound, like suddenly.
Movement seems to be very, very slow and still, or very quick
It
and
also makes you look.
which makes kind of sense because I do really like extremes in general. It's a lot. And a lot of these sections were like pretty much entirely improvised on stage because there was no other way to do it. I mean, you had the concept. We had the concept of getting tangled and ending up certain places, but how you had to get there was, it never worked the same twice. So you always kind of had to be creative about it.
That's my favorite part.
You kind of end up entangled there. Yeah, it's very violent in so many ways. It will be great to analyze in like in an interdisciplinary way, for example. But okay,
And
that's
to
why
say,
it makes you look strong because it takes so much control. It looks like you're exercising so much strength and stuff like that to be in control of the whole apparatus and stuff like that. That's why I ask like about your training, and it seems like ballet and yoga as training practice. That's it seems it seems to be a rigorous training. It seemed to be like you train rigorously, at least for, well, in general, but in this piece in particular.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because composers are not like that. Like, composers, like, everyone has instruments that they played and playing growing up, but a lot of composers get to like a level, especially once they get to like a doctoral study level, like they're not actually actively still pursuing. I mean, they might not even touch an instrument in some cases. Yeah, so it's different because, like, yeah, you continue on the practice of
staying strong. Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like somewhat it's a bit unfair because our instrument is our body and we have to keep the body ready to go here, and we're making, so we're composing and making. But I mean, that's kind of also the joy of it, is doing that. And I would say the stronger I am, and I'm guessing this is true for many people, the more you can generate. Like, I'm more creative I find more, the better my instrument, the more accessible the more access I have to movement options. You make, I think I
Well,
make.
I even remember when we were working at Liaison, like, you know, I took a couple dance classes as a very, very little kid, but I'm a person willing to move, but not someone who has any trained or skill to move. And I remember, like, I have ideas like, oh, I want to maximize the direction, the movement in like this direction, and I'd get to where I thought was the max, and then you take it like, oh, well, we can do this and this and this and this, and actually go way further. And I'm like, oh, okay, and it just didn't occur to me because I did not have that kind of strength or ability to do any of those things.
And I think in the end, that's the interesting part about dance, that it like goes just a bit beyond pedestrian. Like in a way that Liaison is a very pedestrian piece because I'm limited by these strings, but in trying to get beyond the pedestrian is what is the interesting part for me for dance, that you're doing more than just someone else jumping up on stage. But yeah.
I think we can talk about another aspect of you as an artist, because if I was thinking of showing Lunch, for example, that is a
I think we should
very,
show
very
Lunch.
contrasting piece with a very, very different aesthetic. We could speak about humor, probably gimmicks, what you think is gimmicky to reach certain things, or not gimmicky, what works, because those are things that we talk about in composition and in music too, but of course with other materials. But at the same time, there are points of convergence. There are many points of convergence. Let me just put it on screen. You can talk a bit about it. Okay. This is from last year. You did this on 2023. It was performed, but did you choreograph it on 2022, 2023, 2023 itself?
Yep.
Right out of the gate, the pacing is faster. It's very contrasting, more playful. We can notice
And all the
another
material is
aspect
laid
of
out in
Melanie
lines
Aceto
rather
here. Sorry, what was that?
all the material is laid out like in lines, almost like in like rows and lines, rather than a more abstract presentation of physical material.
They got really good at dancing in bags. Like that takes some skill.
Yeah.
They're just kind of cheeky, you know, silly. Yeah, so this is the transition to like section 2. But once the bags are on their feet, I got to get them off their feet somehow. So that was that.
Very theatrical, I will say, definitely.
Yeah, this one definitely necessitated a lot of performance. Like Cloud, the plastic just kind of beat everyone out. You know, they were beautiful performers, but it was so prominent. Um, this is the characters are kind of
Was it hard to teach the dancers to be like theatrical? I think you're muted. I'm gonna mute it.
You're muted.
I
You're
think
muted, Melanie.
somehow.
sorry.
It's okay, fine.
Fortunately, they were they were really good at acting. A couple of them do music theater.
Oh, yeah.
They were really theatrical from the get-go. Like that's them. I didn't really have to coach anything too much.
That's cool. Yeah. That is not the same in general when you work with musicians, because I've had musicians be theatrical and it's difficult at times.
It somehow reminds me of the theater students in my bachelor's degree. Well, in the Faculty of Humanities of Liberal Arts, whatever, in the University of Puerto Rico. That's why I mentioned of the theatricality that I kind of see in it. And then you mentioned it too, that they are theater students in a way, musical theater students, you said?
Yeah, well, they're all
kind of shows. There's something about it. I can't pinpoint it because I've never studied it formally, but there's something about it. The play, is it the the expression, the hyper expression in a way, expressivity, you might say. You might describe it in many ways, but there's that factor there definitely present, and it kind of accentuates the process of the piece, or not the process, the piece itself, the thing that kind of defines what the piece is about. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely, because it's choreography, but without their performance, without their performativity, or without them really bringing the characters alive, the choreography would kind of fall flat. So they are definitely this more so than other pieces. I mean, Liaison, I had to perform a certain way for it to read for sure, but these guys are really bringing a characterization to the work.
So when you start the piece, you said you wanted to work with bags. Did you immediately know you wanted it to have a more lighter, a humorous tone? Because you could have theoretically worked with bags in a similar way that you worked with the plastic and Clouds, where you worked with the material more abstractly.
I was going to make a really cool, like avant-garde, like weird piece, like shred the bags. And I don't know, I thought it would be just like a weird, like downtown New York City modern dance. And it just didn't go that way. I guess it was partly that the folks I had in the room, they're pretty funny and lighthearted. And we just played with the bags, and everything we were coming up with was hysterical. So I just kind of abandoned. We didn't even get weird. We didn't generate stuff that was interesting or, in an abstract way. Most of the stuff we came up with was kind of literal, like putting a bag on your head and on your feet. But it was okay because we generated so much material that was in the same world that I could put it together and make something.
It's interesting because then in that thinking, like if you had been assigned a different group of dancers, you would have likely ended up with a completely different piece.
That always fascinates me. Even say if I were to make it at a different time of the year, or if we had rehearsals on a Wednesday instead of a Saturday, I'm always amazed, like, do I make up what I make up because it's that exact day, time, and place? I mean, I think there's something to that. I'm me. I'm always me, whether it's a Tuesday or a Friday. But I have to think I make up what I make up because of that exact time and space. So yeah, so there's some magic in that. I don't know.
For sure. I feel
And
like
then,
I do a lot of collaborations in my work, and I feel the same. Like I feel like the person I'm collaborating with makes the work. Like there's no way I would have ever written even a similar piece without that particular collaboration.
and so Megan, yeah, you can imagine that exponentially with these dancers, because Mario is the one who jumped in the bag. I would never have tried to jump in the bag like that. And he just did it.
I wouldn't even think that was possible until I see them do it.
Of course, he tried it, and then everybody was like, "Oh, I have to try it." And then so we had this whole bag jumping, and pretty much everybody could do it. And so yes, they generate stuff that I wouldn't normally generate, or they'll be doing something, and I capitalize on an idea that they present. And so, absolutely, if I had a different cast, it would be a different piece, which is a little bit of the magic.
Yeah, and it kind of
it's fun.
Does away with the image of the choreographer as a dictator, or even the what Megan mentioned would be like the composer as a dictator. It's kind of like a dialogue. So many times, especially when we are working with performers, with specific performers that are gonna present a piece, it's like, no, we go back and forth, revising, thinking again, what are we gonna do? We have an original idea for sure, but it evolves and it has to do with the performers in so many ways. That will that definitely is another point of convergence.
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest difference about making a solo on myself versus making a group piece, is by definition, it's by default is a collaboration with the dancers. When I make a group piece, it just, yeah, it is, which is exciting. And it's energizing because I come in and show them what I've made already, to kind of model what I'm looking for. And then they generate stuff in the room with me, and then we go back and forth. So it's pretty, like, it's a catalyst. We keep recatalyzing each other.
Well, you're exchanging energy pretty much. It's like it's a feedback of energy. You give them something and they get excited, hyped up about it, and then they react to it, and you get hyped up by their reaction, and it's a back and forth. It seems pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
and
it is. Yeah,
it's like the work of art. It's classically seen as being done by this genius, by this artist that is working alone in a room or somewhere, and it's like, no, we're very influenced by the people we talk with, that we work with, that we collaborate with, because in the end it's it's very human. Art is very human in the end. That's why the liaison piece is very interesting for me. I'm very interested in when the arts try to go into the mechanical territory, so to speak, and that kind of like how we react to that in contrast to how we react to other people. How we react to other people is more like a hyping up process, a bringing up process, a building ourselves up process. With technology, it's more uncertain in many ways, especially nowadays, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I teach composition, and I try to tell my students, don't feel like you have to go in a dark room and close the door and figure out how to make this piece. Like, get in a room with other people, or, brainstorm, just keep generating material. The answer is not like in your head. It's in the activity
Oh
of
yeah.
acting with either.
Yeah, I teach composition, like music composition is the same way. I tell them, like, it's really hard to make something out of nothing. Once you have something, it's not as hard.
Which is reason number one, working with material objects is in so many ways easier, even though all of the challenges you have with the material itself, you're not starting from nothing. When you have just your body in an empty room, a dance studio, like, you know, without a piece of music, that's like nothing. So yeah, so anyhow, just to kind of come full circle with the material objects,
Yeah.
it gives a place.
Maybe you could. I was saying, oh, maybe you can also talk about a little bit about like your relationship with the sound, because you have, you know, very like you have something like where we showed the lunch where there is a track, and then other pieces that you're generating sound. I mean, yeah, you're generating. They're generating sound a little bit in lunch too, but yeah, so that it's a little bit different. Those pieces, and yeah, and you mentioned with lunch that the movement came first, and then you found the tracks.
Yeah, I more or less in lunch, I was completely interested in working with these bags and all different sizes and what we could do. But then at the end of the day, I know I needed some energy surrounding that. And I love klezmer music, and I knew it would be joyful and funny. So I'd found that music to shape the piece, to follow the phrasing of the music, but the objects and the concept was first. But there is this other side to my work where I love to do a music visualization. I love to follow the structure of the music. Like the music actually makes me move, like it tells my body what to do. So that's always super fun, you know, to not start with nothing. If I put on a piece of music, it tells my body what to do. So that's the piece. One of the examples is Front Page, the piece I made.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. How would you categorize front page in relation to what you are saying?
So that one, I wanted to work with material newspaper. So I was like, oh, I really want to, you know, explore. I can imagine a lot of fun things with newspaper. I don't remember why. I think I was just looking for a piece of music. Anyhow, and then ended up the music was kind of primary. And I was following the structure of the music, trying to integrate the newspaper within the structure of the music. So the music was leading me. Whereas lunch, the bags were kind of leading me, but well, yeah, I guess I ended up I leaned on the structure, like I just said, for lunch. I leaned on the structure of the music, but we had already generated so much stuff with lunch with the bags that the music came in kind of late. With Front Page and the newspapers, we had generated a lot of options to work with the newspaper, but then as soon as I found the music, we worked around the sound. So it's, I guess, kind of in the middle, but the music is pretty primary in that one.
Did you write the beginning, or did you imagine the beginning afterwards? Because the beginning seems pretty much like a solo piece, like the first minute.
Yeah.
I'm saying. Let me put it on screen so everyone knows what we're talking about. But the beginning, it seems like you're gonna go solo, or the dancer is gonna go solo. It gives that impression, like at first.
But I had to follow the structure of the music, right? You know, that's what my interest is, and I didn't hear anything else but a solo for this piece of music. And what I can say about this is I thought I was just going to go abstract, but when I got in the studio and generated this solo, it became a little heavy. I don't know exactly why. But I just went with it. I was just going to use the newspapers as just an abstract material to fill the space, but it did get a little loaded. You know, it ended up being about headlines.
Yeah, another thing I noticed, I can skip to that in a minute, but it's the headlines towards more towards the end, is it? Or, well, towards the middle. And it kind of adds a social element that I haven't seen in other of your pieces. And it seems that you kind of tend to shy away from that, or don't really think that much about it. I can relate to definitely. But even if they are just headlines, people are gonna think about social issues because of those headlines. Like even if the intention is just to show headlines because it's newspapers, it's pretty cool. So
I
when there's music, you follow the structure of the music. When there's pre-recorded music or already composed music, that's how you work. Okay.
yeah, I could comment on the headlines, but like, so yeah, this is the main phrase, and I'm following the music exactly. So this is a little like lunch, not far off
Hmm.
narrative, like depicting its characterization.
Hmm.
You come about, look at these. You see what's happening in the newspaper. Stop messing around, Amanda.
There's that theatricality again.
Yeah.
Are these some of the same students?
Oh, that's Mario. Yeah, the blonde man.
Yeah.
Um, he's the only one the same, but
Okay.
same University of Buffalo dancers. So I heard.
There it goes again.
Yeah, snowballs come back from lunch.
Hmm.
Where's this music from? Do you remember?
Oh, I have to look. Shoot.
No worries. No
It's
worries.
Carmen, right?
Yeah.
Carmen.
No, 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 no.
Carmen? Carmen? Okay.
Yeah,
My music history teachers will be very disappointed in me
I
then.
think it is. No, I
Look.
Then in you, if it isn't.
I think it is, but maybe not.
That was a little mishap that night.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Carmen.
Disappointed in me then.
Maybe a little cameo.
Well, to be honest, I haven't listened to Carmen in its entirety. So
That's
I'm not a
obviously it's like
very
a
good
violin
music
version.
history student. Huh?
It's
Okay.
it's obviously like a violin version, but yeah.
Okay, so we're in the second section or phrase right now. Or
Yep.
is it the third? Should we skip to the headlines, do you think? Or
Yeah.
because there's that as well, it's not that long a piece, but then it's kind of slows down a bit, and then these
You can,
headlines begin, and they take, visually speaking, well, it's a visual art, they take the whole most of the attention of the audience will go to the headlines. even
Yeah.
though we are still uh, paying a lot of attention to the dancers and to what they are doing. Like, of course, we're gonna pay attention to the headlines, and it's kind of like a bombardment of headlines. Bam, bam, bam. Where first? From where did you take them? Are these from 2023, 2024 headlines? Okay.
Yep. So I chose them. They're not random. Yeah, and it seemed like at a certain point in the piece, I was like, oh, this is the piece I'm making. I didn't intend to make a piece like this. Like you said, I don't make pieces that have social political commentary, but this was general enough for me. It was just obviously a comment on how many horrible things are happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think the music says that. I mean, obviously it says it along with the movement depicting it, but
Mhm. I think the piece is also much more narrative than maybe some of your other works.
yeah.
There's the real bombardment.
Maybe because we have the text and
Yeah. Yeah, the
And
solos.
there's so much stuff going on. The brain gets overloaded. This will be the equivalent to what we call in composition to statistical listening.
Oh,
Like the brain can only take so much at one point. So one has to choose, or one sees everything as a mass of movement, a mass of information at the same time.
mhm.
like craziness at the end. Yeah, I wish the lights didn't go out so soon. It should have been the music ends and the light should have still been on for you to see that last image of the chaos with the final headline.
Uh huh.
But we have what's great about UB and also a blessing and a curse is that we have students running, sound and designing everything, and the students get great experience doing all the parts of producing theater and producing a concert. So anyhow, so the lights went off a little too soon in order to take in that last image of the chaos, and the last quote says something about the end of the world.
Oh, it's more dramatic than I
Yeah,
originally perceived it. Then
yeah. It's,
that's
it's
pretty
Mhm.
cool.
something's about predicting. Scientists predict something about the coming of the end of the world or
I
something.
think that, well, since we both deal with time-based art
Mhm.
forms, it's like time quickens towards the end. It's a piece where time perception kind of like gets more condensed, you might say. Like more events happen in less time towards as it progresses. It's kind of like it begins with this very long minute, but the last minute is very, very charged.
Yes, yeah.
And kind of like the perception of time is totally opposite to the beginning of what it
Mhm.
Mhm.
towards the end is what I will say about that. Um,
Which
which
is
I
why
think
I
is
like
cool.
using composed music. I mean, composers are amazing, and if it's a good piece of music, I'm literally just piggybacking on an amazing construction, an amazing composition. That's why I think it's satisfying to choreograph to a piece of music, and I frankly think it's wise. Someone has
Mhm.
already created this amazing structure and piece and nuance and theme, and to just piggyback on that instead of
Mhm.
reinventing the wheel is kind of smart, you know?
Have
I
you done work with like music composed specifically for dance?
I haven't. I never made a piece and say, right, can you compose for this, which is common in dance companies who have a budget and time and
Mhm.
whatnot. I think because I don't know. I'm always amazed by composers. I've probably said this before. I don't know how you hear something that doesn't exist. Like I can move my body. If nothing exists, I can move. I don't know how you compose out of silence. So if I make a piece, I guess that would be the job of the composer if I made a piece and said,
Mhm.
can you please compose? But I don't think I would have any requests like I would, any descriptors to say
Mhm.
what I would like in the composition. So I've
I
never
mean,
done that.
I think if like I think that it could be like a more abstract collaboration where you show them some of your work or show them some of the movements, and
Mm,
that maybe generates
and make something
music
together.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, making a piece from the same nugget of an idea. Like if a composer and I were both interested. Well, I mean, the closest thing is liaison, honestly. You had the idea, it was your
Yeah.
idea, but me
Well,
kind of,
Liaison became a totally different project because you physically could not separate the music from the dance. So it became like, I mean, I don't think we kind of each came with our own ideas, but then when we constructed the piece, we like literally had to be in the same physical space. Like,
I think
right.
that one of the YouTube comments on
Yeah.
one of the versions is like, "This isn't music, blah blah blah. Why did you
Oh, that's
publish this and stuff like that?"
that's like
It was a very
I
dumb
understand.
critique, and it doesn't
I
have a
understand why
motive or
people
something like that.
are interested in that, but I kind of feel like so a lot of people like to be like, oh, is this music? Is this dance? Is this theater? And
I find it
I
funny.
understand kind of why, but I just feel like at the end of the day, I feel like that's the least interesting discussion you can have about the piece.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's like you're just literally this is a discussion about semantics over, like just vocabulary,
Yeah.
and the words of the, um, yeah.
But yeah, we should do something, Megan. We should get an idea and you compose for me and I'll dance and
Yeah.
we could do that. Or
Yeah.
Juan, if you're game, I'm happy to do that. I have not done that
Yeah.
process yet.
Collaborations were the norm. Some great works of music have come out of collaborations with ballet, for example, or dance. Like I'm talking
Yeah.
about classics, about masterworks, the so-called masterworks. Like the Rite
Oh
of
yeah.
Spring will be the first that come to mind, right? Megan.
Oh, for sure. But I feel like the Rite of Spring, it's so monumental in like as a piece of music, and everyone knows it's ballet. But I feel like people know the music
But it became
more than
concert.
they know the ballet. Well, you know why? Because I think from what I know about it is it was um it was radical and progressive at the time and controversial, but the music isn't so much controversial. I think it
I
was some of the movements for the era, maybe.
What I was
I'm not.
gonna say and elaborate on what Melanie was saying and what I was saying earlier is that it's a time-based art, right? So it's kind of like two different expressions of the same phenomenon. You might see it that
Mm-hmm.
way. Dance and music is like we operate in time, we operate with pacing, we operate with how time passes, with time perception, with an audience that we kind of influence how they perceive time. So there's a lot of points of
Mm-hmm.
convergence here and there. Definitely,
Mm-hmm.
we should definitely
I mean,
collaborate.
because I think a big thing that composers talk about, which I would imagine dancer choreographers would talk about too, is that the fact when you're like experiencing music, time is physically a constant thing, but we don't always experience it the same. Like we can experience it feeling really dragged out or really slow, and that's like a point of interest to a lot of composers, probably most of them, that we can kind of change
No,
our
not most.
perception of time.
Plenty, but
I
not
would say,
most.
you don't think so? In some
No.
ways, I mean, not the point, but I would say a point of interest is that, yeah.
I just always think that we are kind of conditioned as humans where we can listen to something for a long time, but when we watch it, we want it to change. So like we will listen to a long opening of a song, or we'll listen to minimalism, or and people are fine with that. But if something doesn't happen in the dance right away, they're like, when are they moving on? So I feel like I'm always pushing the limits for our audience anyhow, into like staying with a long intro, or to staying with an idea, or even liaison. Like it's not much, like you have to kind of wait for it and take in the whole piece. But I think people are much more open to sound taking time than the visuals taking time. That's just a hunch I have.
Will it be the well? In music, we have this kind of ritualistic aspect, like the stage is like higher from the audience in a sense, and classical music's background comes from religion in many ways, like, and the concert space itself in many ways can be seen as a continuation of ritual. It might have something to do with that, but that's kind of like a long conversation and a lot of things to take into consideration, I would say.
Yes, that's
I
another
think one
road.
another thing that kind of is kind of related that we had talked about being interested is like trends, because we've talked a lot about like music trends and what gets the performances and what gets the awards and the recognition. Are there any like trends that you see in the dance world like that are getting the most praise or recognition?
The most playtime, I would say, and again, this is just one one thought, is that there seems to be an interest in movement invention, like the dance companies that are inventing, new and unique movement vocabulary, that people are really defining a new way of moving or a unique way of moving. There's a lot of interest in that. And I think that's been true for, I don't know, like 10 years. For sure. And I mean, time is flying, so probably longer than that, but really pushing the limits of the body and what's possible and what's so far from pedestrian. The farther you can get from pedestrian movement. In the 60s, it was pedestrian movement. They were interested in pedestrian movement in the era of the Judson Church. So I mean, things go in waves. The interest. I'm sure we'll go back to pedestrian movement at some point, but it seems like now we're still in a time where getting as far from pedestrian is of interest. And I don't feel like I do that. I don't spend time. I attend to it. I'm trying to find interesting movement vocabulary. I don't. It's not that I'm not interested in that. I just don't invest a lot of the limited rehearsal time that I have. I'm investing in it, as you can see, in exploring a very specific concept or material or piece of music.
It seems like you're more exploring inventing like relationships with like both with material and with other people on stage.
Thanks, Megan. That's helpful. Yes, I'm exploring. Yeah, in relationships to physical material or to the music. Not again. I'm trying to be as creative as I can with the movement vocabulary. But other companies are investing a lot of, like, their interest is in what new physical pathways, what new possibilities are there for the.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so
that's interesting. Yeah, because there's a lot of composers out there that are interested in finding new sounds. But I don't think those type of composers get praise or recognition or performances comparatively
especially in the
to
US.
others.
No, especially in the US, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that there's a difference, that in movement, we want to see the body do the weirdest thing we've never seen before. But in music, we actually don't want to hear new songs we've never heard before.
I think that it goes back to what you're saying about the visual aspect. That's how I feel about painting about different visual arts. People are more open towards the different to towards the new, to the avant-garde, but not in music. In music, they want to listen to the next John Williams, to the next Hans Zimmer, to what they already know in a
Mhm.
probably modified way, or
Uh-huh.
it's
Oh
kind
yeah, I
of
mean
frustrating sometimes
it's
to,
hard. Like
if
when
you
we
want to
took like
explore some.
musicology exams,
Yeah,
like you had to date like what every kind of piece of music for. But I feel like students in the future, I don't know how they would date a lot of the stuff that's prevalent today, because there's so much stuff that is getting a lot of accolades that could have easily been written over 100 years ago, easily.
I was
I'm like,
saying that's the
how, I don't
same
know.
thing today. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that's interesting. Where I
what I
think there was more of an era of that maybe in the 70s in music, but not at all now.
Yeah, we've talked about that, but uh,
Yeah.
before ending with this and stuff, I would like to ask Melanie, why do you think there are not that many collaborations with composers? What and dance and choreography? Why is it not as prevalent as I think it should be, since we are pretty much speaking the same language with different dialects, or trying to express the same thing in different with different uh, articulations, you might say. Why is that?
Yeah. I have a hunch that it's a bit about logistics. And just to say, like, there are many artists and many companies, big and small, that to say that they do have either long-time collaborations with composers or music groups. And so, that being said, but for all the folks who don't, or why is it not essentially common practice
Yeah,
among all choreographers? There's a little bit of logistical in terms of resources, I would say, limited resources. And for me, what's real is time. It takes longer to make something
Hmm.
together than it would not.
Hmm.
We don't have the luxury of time. I find that people who do have the kind of most most intense collaborations, or regular collaborations, have, I want to say, the luxury of time, but they make the time, and they'll have a
Hmm.
year-long collaboration in making a piece of either music and dance, or music and theater, or they'll have a dramaturg or a playwright. And so you need time to, and I'm talking about making like evening length works, like 45-minute works or
Hmm.
something. So
Even Liaison took us like 2.5 years.
yeah, it just takes time to figure
Yeah.
out what it is you're making with the other person. Um, so yeah, I don't know that it's that simple. I also think that, from what I can say in higher ed, it's not really taught. Like, because back to the issue of, we're learning to be dancers and choreographers at the
Mhm.
same time. There's not a school for just choreography. Everyone who's making dances is dancing. So you're trying to train in the same day that you're making pieces. So
hmm.
to say, I know, by and large, we encourage collaborations, but it's not common practice to ask students to make work in collaboration with other folks. So we have a course called, what is it called? Collaborative practice. So we tried to, we wanted to make a course that, like, kind of encourage this
Mhm.
collaborative practice. And it could be with a composer, it could be with a playwright. It doesn't have to be, it could be a media artist. But um yeah, I would say
That's very cool.
it's not the practice that's encouraged in academia. It's not discouraged, but it's not prominent in academia. So it might not
Hmm.
carry on for the
Hmm.
choreographers who are going out into the world.
Yeah.
Just because
I mean, I
those
think
things.
especially in programs where that do have, strong dance programs and strong composition programs like UB, like it seems like a miss avenue.
I will say that we did that. So I taught a semester with David Felder, and we had choreographers
Okay.
and composers together. The challenge that you know of is that the composers have to compose, and then they need to find players to realize that composition. And the choreographer doesn't want to look at the notes on the page, or doesn't want to hear the MIDI version. So like that, just to say that process, that the composer could be working along and working quickly
It's a long
and
process, yeah.
making this piece, but it was really challenging because the projects that were most successful were the composers who were playing their own music. Either it was digital or there was a percussionist who was playing his own score. So we need, in a limited process, we need to hear the music sooner than the composers can realize it, because we're realizing the movement in real time. It seems like the composers have two steps. They're composing it, and then they need somebody to play it.
Yeah.
So that's also a challenge.
And if
Yeah.
you're recording it, then that's another layer to the whole process. So it's kind
Well,
of like,
sometimes it becomes hard with the rights, you know, that like, you know, I have pieces that, you know, I own the rights to the piece, but I don't own the rights to the recordings, you know, so
Yeah, I would
then
say
it just becomes hard.
Yeah, I would say it's time. I mean, maybe I would be curious what other people would say, and but it really is just it takes so much time for all those reasons. And I know that at UB it's a real challenge to do that. And I've worked with composers over the years. I'm part of Vision of Sound and some other, obviously have lots of composer friends. But I've been more successful working with a piece of music that they've already composed and that they've already have a recording for. Even if we perform it live, for me to wait for them to find players is often problematic.
to go through all the process. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've been here for a while. I don't have any more questions, and I don't want to take any more of your time. Megan, do you want to?
No, it was fantastic having you and chatting.
I just want to
art,
share
dance,
like
music.
your website. You can find Melanie's work on her website, right?
Yes.
MelanieAceto.com.
Yes.
Solo works and group works, I believe.
Yes.
Recordings of both. And yeah, I think that's a wrap, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Juan. Thanks, Megan, for having me. It's fun to talk about dance. It's fun to talk about dance with music. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you so much for featuring me in my work.
Thanks to you.
Yeah, thanks for
like
coming.
1,000 times over. Thank you, really, for coming over and talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure. You're both welcome in Buffalo. Megan knows that, Juan. If you ever want to make the trip to Buffalo, please.
Let's see if I come back someday. I don't know if I'm prepared for that. Okay, that's about it. Well, be safe, people. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.